Hello, I'm Abby Jack. I'm a senior here at Barnard College and a member of Athena's Student Advisory Board. And I just wanted to give you all a quick welcome to this great event and also introduce a little bit about what the Athena Center does. So this event is part of Spark, and Athena Center for Leadership, which does a lot of cool programs for students all around campus, empowering them in their own leadership and also to go out there and tackle challenges that they may not have thought possible before. And it's a lot of cool work that we do here. So I just wanted to say hello and that welcome to Athena. Thank you for coming out today. And yes, so excited to be here and so excited to, see what's going on.
Okay, so quickly, I'm going to introduce, first of all, I want to thank the Athena Center again and thank Lauren behind the scenes, Chris, Umbreen, the team for making this possible, giving us this space and getting our copies of the books. And I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Annalise. I'll introduce my mom, Karina, on Zoom here. And we just wanted to get started before we introduce our amazing panelists by giving a little introduction. So we set out to publish Chasing Spirits, this book that you have, to honor Maya Logan, my sister and my mom's daughter, and their life goal to be a best-selling author. Before that, we started with this urgent need to research or to reach Maya Logan, as the Department of Child and Family Services in LA had restricted our contact and released our presence from that night that Maya ran away and until the day that they died. So we had limited contact, and there was sometimes, for me, this possibility of even connecting with my sister was difficult. And so during the time that Maya was on the run, they journaled in secret, knowing that hospital staff could confiscate and did confiscate these journals and this writing. So in a sense, surveyed by the state, Maya Logan had become the story they'd authored for themselves. And we wanted to honor the complexity of that, the legacy of that, but also to just try our best to share that and to share in this time when we were so sectioned off from it. As I compiled my radio story transcript, which was incorporated into the book, Maya's gift for storytelling and art, our family photographs, my mom's writing, and shared love for language began to open up our process of holding fragments of Maya, and we couldn't have done it and didn't do it alone. In 2022, when Maya Logan would have turned 15, my mother read and reached out to authors and advocates who shared stories and experiences that deeply resonated with our own, including Tess and Honey and Kyle, whose shared work and experiences deeply resonated with our own, and whose work kept us going through this heartbreaking time. In 2023, around what would have been Maya Logan's 16th birthday, I received the WNYC Fellowship to produce and direct my own story of what home meant to me. However, this wasn't published because of low resources and funding towards LGBTQ-centered publications and journalism at the time. And while working on the story, I also struggled to figure out my own voice in the midst of this story and to document this largely unspoken or unspeakable part of myself. I called the 60 contacts whose names my sister had noted in their journals and interviewed 6 of them with the director of the DCFS and other professionals. And our experience with hospital staff, police, and the LA County DCFS ultimately made us feel completely without community, criminalized and ostracized from our family, our sister and daughter. And our profound feeling of existing without community changed as soon as we met Tess, Honey, and Kyle, and Meg as well, all of whom radiated warmth and solidarity throughout their own lives and their stories. And yet none of us could have imagined this reality bringing us together like this. I was lucky enough to be able to meet all of these souls and to bring most of them here right now. And we'd love to turn it over to Kyle, Tess, Honey, and Meg to introduce themselves. Kyle, if you'd like to go first.
Where's over there?
I know.
I'm gonna face this way. Roughly, do you guys? Sorry to exclude you, but it's nice to meet you all. I'm so happy to be here. I am just so proud to be part of this project. I published a memoir about my sister who's struggling with mental health, and we lost her in, I'm trying to think the date now, 2014. So I published that book in 2022, and I teach creative writing, and I'm a therapist. So mental health and writing is a big passion of mine. And yeah, I'm just really happy to be here with you. I'm so happy we're talking about these important subjects.
Thank you. Tess and Honey, if you'd like to go. Oh. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
My name is Honey Buff and I am Tess and Liv's mom. We lost Liv to suicide in 2019. And when she passed away, our lives totally shifted into a reality I would never have anticipated in my life. And we decided that we wanted to be very open about the fact that she struggled with her mental health and that she died by suicide, and started our project, the Live Project, by creating a film that we take around the country. So I'll let Tess introduce herself and tell you a little bit more about us.
Yeah, I'm Tess. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Annalise and Karina, and congratulations. I mean, wow. Listening to you speak, Annalise, you do it better than anyone. I mean, the way you speak is so beautifully and from the heart. And I'm so great to have connected with you both. I am a theater artist and an arts educator, and also the co-founder of the Live Project, our nonprofit. And I'm really happy that I've been able to connect with other siblings. So hearing these sibling stories today is really wonderful, and we're honored to be part of this.
Hey, is it my turn? Okay, hey, hi, I'm Karina. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. And it's so wonderful to see you, Honey and Tess, and Kylie. You know, you really all just changed our lives so much, and really did give us that sense of community. So thank you for being here today. Annalise, should I kick off? Do we have anyone else to introduce, or should I kick off our questions?
I haven't joined yet.
You can go ahead, yes.
Thanks. I needed to come off mute. Thank you. Okay, so I'll just start. You know, I really want to think about, I mean, this weird and horrifying, you know, experience that brought us all together, but also built community and brought so much positivity to us, certainly, right, through our relationships. And, you know, as I think about the process of losing Maya Logan, I really am reminded of a French word called l'indicible, which is the French word for the unspeakable, because I think the experience of loss and of grief, especially when we're talking about a family member, a child, a sibling, these are things that are unspeakable. And they're in fact so often, right, so heartbreaking and so sudden, so abrupt that they happen, that they cause those of us who survive to really feel like maybe our lives don't mean a lot. Maybe we're inconsequential, or even our lives might feel without purpose at these moments of loss. I remember that when Maya Logan passed away, died by suicide, I was working at a very busy consulting job in the diversity space, actually. And I had loved my work up until that point. I was also lecturing at colleges, and I'd always loved my work. But I suddenly started to just think, why am I even bothering? Why should I even go forward? Like, can I even show up to work? And I was working remotely. It was not like a physical battle to get there, right? I wasn't commuting, but just, I didn't know that any of it mattered anymore. It felt meaningless. And so, you know, that example, I think really of thinking about why I was here, right? Really that loss catalyzing that question for me, why am I here? And I kept coming back to Maya Logan and the passion with which she existed, her reverent humor, right? Their sense of humor, their sense of wanting to be in the world for a purpose with a vision and wanting to give their talents. That made me really remember that life is so short, first of all, and second of all, that we're here to really give our talents, and that in fact, creating is the most important thing that we can do in the space of that kind of loss. And you know, that was something I came to, but that wasn't overnight. And I'm really curious with all of you, the panelists today, I'm wondering what drove you to all to create in the space of loss, right? Why was it urgent for you to actually create? What was it about artwork, about creative work that felt important? Were there moments when you wanted to give up? And how did you move through those? So I'll just open up the floor, whoever wants to jump in here, but I'm really curious about what drove you to create.
I
You
can
start.
I'll jump in. I think what drove me personally, and I think us as a family, if I can speak for both of us, was not wanting other families to endure this pain, and if they have, letting them know that they're not alone. And I think also, you know, when we lost Liv, and something I still say all the time, I said it in the car earlier today, like, where do they go? Where are they? They were here 1 second and now they're gone. And I think creating a story, our story, sharing our story, helped me be like, she was real. Her life was, it happened. She was magic. And even though she's not physically here anymore, she did exist. And she's not just a statistic.
Right.
She is a person with a whole life. And I think that was really my impetus to want to create.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we're a creative family. I'm a visual artist. Tess and Liv are both musically gifted and theatrically gifted. And Liv expressed herself through her art. And that's what we do as well. So in making our film, we felt we were honoring Liv by utilizing the filmmaking medium. But also, it wasn't just about talking about her suicide and her mental illness. It was talking, because that didn't define the person Liv was. Liv was an incredible soul who was gifted, compassionate, outrageous. She was incorrigible. She loved fellow human beings. She was passionate about being there for the underdog, for anyone who was struggling. And so it was important for us to utilize art and creativity to bring her story to the forefront so that other young people could see they're not alone in their feelings. And you know, that it was just really important to us to deliver the message in that way.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so beautiful. And by the way, I have to add that when I watched your film, when I had the pleasure of going to see your film screening, you know, it was the first time I had seen anyone give voice to what you just said, right? That the soul, the incorrigible spirit, all of that came so through that I thought, oh, how did you do that work of pulling those memories together, right? It was so raw. I sat and literally was in tears for most of the time because it just all, you pulled all the emotion out of me. So thank you. You rendered her, you rendered her soul so present. You really did. And I thank you for that. I'd love to hear from Kylie, maybe your thoughts on this same question about how you arrived at that space of creating. It might feel like completely all you want to do is stay at home, right? And in bed at that moment of the devastation, right? So how did you, what was your journey like in moving to the space of creating from loss?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so torn. I want to look in the eyes.
Oh,
Everything. But I think it's a great question. I don't think I can answer any better than you all have just said, but I will add that it took me a while. I mean, I think part of why I am so amazed by Annalise is when she's a child prodigy in my mind, like first of all, but I think at her age, I was not ready to tackle this, and it took me a while to really, shed light on the subject. There's a lot of stigma. It's really hard to make meaning of something that feels meaningless and senseless at a time, which is the way loss does and mental illness and suicide does. So I think writing is how I made sense of the world, and eventually that's what I was drawn to and how I thought I could honor and capture my sister's memory in the way you all have just described. But it's hard work. It's not it's not easy. And I'm very impressed by all of you for accomplishing it so beautifully.
And I have to just add on to that, that this also was such a process for the,
Yeah.
actually, it's really full circle because my first year at Barnard, I felt immediately alienated when I would hear someone ask, it's kind of basic, right? Like, do you have siblings? And I didn't know at that time my sister had run away. And so I didn't know where is my sibling? Are they okay? And I felt like that very basic switch actually pushed me away from a community I had dreamed of being part of. And it showed me that I had to grow in order to be able to share that part of myself. And it wasn't going to come as easily as an icebreaker, or it wasn't going to be like an easy question for me. And that just, it leads me to think of also the presence, as we had brought up with especially Liv's presence right now. And of course, all of the presences of our sisters, daughters, they're in the room right now. And I have been recently, as an artistically developing person, confronting the complexity of their presence and their absence in our lives, and thinking of how sometimes this was even a violent presence, or the line between mental health, mental illness, that has always not rested with me, because there were so many ways that diagnosis doesn't do anything to the person who they are. But if it can get someone help, that's like a fine line that I've been thinking in myself and my relationship with my sister, with Maya Logan. She was always the risk-taking, daredevil kind of presence, and I was always a rule-following, sort of also creative presence, but we came at creation from very different places. And under the surface, even though we were so different, we would play dress up and make up our game shows together and laugh the nights away. But in my own artistic process, I'm mostly working with dance right now, and I find it critical to channel this missing presence and even the missing violence, if that makes sense. It's a very complex sense of violence, and it's not like a violating sense, but it's something that is a force that opposes me, that I feel the missing of. And I never thought I would miss our arguments. I never thought I would miss those sides of me sometimes feeling afraid of my sister and feeling like I didn't know what was going on in their mind. And this is just very, very personal. But if anyone has an experience of noticing conflicts between your loved one and yourself, and where that energy goes and how you channel it into your art and how you channel their presence in your art, I would love to hear. I'd be very interested. I know it's a very tough kind of question too. Oh, the Zoom. Thanks, Lauren.
There you
Sorry, we lost the mouse to unmute.
Liv's playing with us.
yes.
She does that all the time, technically.
But I just love this question and this kind of idea that you're posing, Annalise, and I really appreciate you saying, like, I miss fighting. Like, I never thought I would miss having fights with her. I think for me, in terms of creativity, we used to sing a lot together, and we would get into fights when we would sing together because I could never harmonize as well as she could. I always had to take the melody, and she was a stickler. Like, I remember a day where we recorded for hours trying to make a perfect video, and somehow the footage is gone, but wherever it is, a lot of it is us just arguing with each other. And it's funny, now that she's gone, I say this sometimes, like, she left me with her voice. I can harmonize now in a way I couldn't before. Like, my ear just feels more tuned. And I really do think it's her. Like when I am singing and expressing myself through song and I'm harmonizing with a track or something, I'm really like, okay, thank you, Liv. Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I have to say you're going to make me cry too, because I was never a singer, never. I had little mini training, maybe at church when I was very young, but I never enjoyed it because I frankly was not practicing or good at it or resonating with it. But then after coming here and after feeling so out of touch with Maya, I started writing song lyrics, and it felt like the only way I could express my emotions. And then I started slowly singing those lyrics, and I'm not a singer by any stretch, but that felt like something that could not have happened without Maya. So that's their spirit.
Wow. That's pretty
Oh.
cool.
I love that. And the whole framing of our book, honestly, Maya Logan was writing this novel, and we would have long conversations about what they were doing, right, and what it meant to them. And they allowed me to be an editor for a while. But then apparently I was a little too heavy-handed in my grammar corrections or spelling or whatever I did. So those privileges were revoked, and I became only a commenter on the final manuscript. And so I feel that, I get it. Like, I'm very aware of that violence, as you say, Annalise. And you want that you want to retain that because it's critical.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like a force that brings out more in ourselves, or it challenges us to do differently than we would be comfortable with maybe. And on that note, I wanted to also just, of course, Kylie, if you want to speak to that too, I wanted to just add that this conflicting perspective leads me to think of also conflicting narratives and truths, and how when we were compiling this book, we had the records from the journal, and the writing and the perception of that Maya Logan had of themselves was changing, and it was different, and it was in this other space than the writing in the creative writing and the fiction writing. And it was knowing the person intimately, it meant something different to read those works and to think, but we lived something together, we shared something together, and this is how certain things were told and interpreted. And that is true with any person, but in a creative work, it was interesting in choosing what to exclude and what to bring in. We went through pages and pages on the floor of my bedroom of journals, scanning them all with my mom, and figuring out what we would leave in, what would be too sensitive, what we could leave out, and what even we believed. And just on that, I wanted to open up to panelists to see during your processes if you confronted that similar difficulty of trying to define what is truth, what is shared truth for you, and or if that's totally different of a perception.
Well, I can speak to our creative process, going through it, and like you going through Liv's journals, was really intense, and trying to be safe in what we shared in our film was vitally important to us. And so we were extremely diligent and thoughtful about what we included, but it also was extraordinarily emotional, because I mean, there were moments when we would read things that she had written and just be like, oh my God, you're so funny. You're so audacious in what you're saying. And the next moment, just like sobbing because of the heart-wrenching feelings that she was putting on paper. So it was an intense process. It was a really intense process.
Oh, and I want to just welcome Meg. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, my deepest apologies. Oh my goodness, I completely spaced out. I'm on Central Time. So anyway, I've been confused all day, and my apologies. I'm so grateful to be here with you. And anyway, thank you all for abiding my spaciness. So and I just want to say that I'm really privileged to join this crew. And Kylie, I've always admired Kylie's work, and was yay. And then I've also had the pleasure of meeting the mother daughter power team, and I'm very grateful for their witness and beautiful work. So all everybody here. So hooray, thank you.
We're honored to have you, Meg, and I just
you.
wanted to uplift, since we didn't get to earlier, Meg is the author of an incredible, also investigative, rigorous work. If you'd like to mention it briefly, Meg.
Sure, yeah, just quickly. So it's called While You Were Out, and it's a story about my family, the struggles that we had with serious mental illness, bipolar specifically, which claimed the life of both my sister and my brother many years apart. And then what I learned as, so what I lessons gleaned from being a member of that family, which was also a family of great joy, which is something that I share in common with the authors of all of the works that we're talking about today. And then it's also expanded because my career was as a newspaper reporter. So I spent the better part of 35 years investigating the failures of the mental health system and why we can't do better by people living with serious mental illness. So I think I brought kind of both of those layers to my book. It came out a year and a half ago, and it's been keeping me hopping. So I know that there is great resonance with the suffering that all of us on this panel have shared, and that people are really, I think, almost desperate to have these conversations. So I think you're well. It's good that we are bearing witness to what we went through, and giving people kind of an on-ramp, or a way to talk about this. So I'm happy to be another voice in this chorus.
Thank you. It's such a gift that you're here. All right, so going back to the question, Bobby, would you like to build off of that last point about creating, deciding to prioritize certain truths or certain perceptions, or do you want to go, depending on getting to the next question?
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about going back to the space of creating and thinking about how, for me, I was in New York at the time I was navigating the loss. And, it was really a very nurturing place on a certain level because art is so central to New York, right? You're seeing it on the street, you're seeing it in museums and performances, and it became kind of what kept me afloat, I think. But at the same time, while we were starting this project and I was in New York, having that maybe saving grace of art as one saving grace, I also was struggling with PTSD. And I didn't necessarily name it as such, but I would recognize it at different moments. So I remember that I would just obsessively during those first, during the whole year that I was writing, would just obsessively go to playgrounds scattered around New York in my neighborhood. And I would watch parents playing with their kids. And there would be this voice inside me that would be almost screaming, like saying, oh gosh, please be careful. You don't know what will happen with this child, this 2-year-old that's on the swing. Like, just please. And I was feeling heartbreak for them. And I wanted to run up to the parents and just warn them of something that might happen that would be devastating to them. And of course, I never did, but I had to fight back that impulse in myself. And of course, in doing that, I realized, okay, clearly this is the kind of way that PTSD, complex PTSD, is really manifesting for me as I'm going through this process of creating. And so I'm wondering what came up for all of you as you engaged in your own creative project along these lines. Did you also face similar moments of that kind of recognition of the trauma that you were struggling with? And how did you navigate those experiences? What did that look like for you?
Well, I can jump in a little bit since I was late to the party. That's a great question. So mine kind of began, so my sister died in 1978, and then I became a newspaper reporter. So all along that was in my body, unprocessed. And then, but I was always drawn to stories for the newspaper about, the inadequacies of the mental health system. Well, then my brother died, and that also wasn't properly processed. I don't know if it's a Midwestern thing. We're not as savvy as you coasties in accessing, mental health care. And I think also having grown up as I did in the 1960s and 70s and in a large Irish Catholic house where, you were meant to just pray it away. So that does show up, trauma, PTSD doesn't go away on its own. It lives in your body and it comes out in funny spots. And it finally caught up to me. I realized when I was writing this book that it was only after I turned fully to the matter of unprocessed grief and the legacy of shame that it just kind of rolled over me. And I'll just make this quick. I can recall as I was in the throes of yet another deep dive investigation. It was like maybe my fifth or sixth in like 10 years. And with each one of them, it took a little more of a piece out of me. And I can remember just falling apart one day and ending up along the shores of beautiful Lake Michigan, just prostrate, like I couldn't move anymore. And my editor kept calling me saying like, are you okay? Are you safe? And I texted him back finally. I'm like, just shut up. I'm having a breakdown. I'll be back in the newsroom in a half an hour. But I just realized like, this isn't normal, like it all finally did catch up to me. And so when I set about to write this book, I just thought, oh boy, now we're really going to go into the, belly of the beast. So I was very careful to have sitting beside me, the access to a good therapist. Yay, therapy, finally.
Yes, I appreciate that and can really relate to that, Meg, as well. I think for me, in sharing my sister's story, I think sometimes the lines would blur of my identity where I started to feel myself in telling her story becoming the girl who lost her sister to suicide and forgetting who I was. And it took, a great therapist and really, focusing on my trauma of losing my sister that really helped me kind of my identity crawl back out and let me be me while also telling her story. And this kind of goes back to the question before of like, what was it like creatively to tell your story? But it was interesting for me kind of balancing the line between telling her story, but then really in the end finding, oh no, I was telling my story of loving her and having a beautiful sister. But it was my experience because, like you have said, Annalise, like these truths, what is true perception, at the end of the day, I think I started saying, I want to tell her story and really ended up, telling my own, and in doing so, figuring out how to care for myself.
That is so
Yeah.
powerful, and it's exactly, honey, if you'd like to.
Oh.
Oh, no, thank you for sharing that. That really, it's like you see what's in my heart as well, and you spoke straight to that. I want to invite Kyla if you'd like to add.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think everyone said it really well. I know, Karina, you mentioned that New York is a very creatively stimulating place, but it's also overstimulating. I will say out loud to it. And I was writing my book. I was a first year post grad after college, and it was overwhelming. It was really overwhelming. And I think like going back to the idea of just like trauma and how it lives in your body, I was surprised by, swollen lymph nodes or not wanting to be in a crowded bar or just no space. And I think I teach memoir writing now, and I tell my students a lot, like, this is not easy. Like, this is hard stuff, and it's gonna come up in strange ways. And I love the idea of the identity question that just brought up too, that, I think for me right now, I'm doing fiction, I'm doing lighter work now, creatively, like my books, and there's still grief, there's still mental health, these themes are still there, the contrasting personalities, those themes are still there. But I think giving yourself permission also to let things go has been the new chapter of my life. And that it's not an abandonment to the person you lost and that you love, but that you're allowed to be lighter as well. I think that's something that has been like a more recent lesson.
Mhm.
Yeah, don't wait until you're 65 to realize that like your identity can exist outside of being a survivor of sibling suicide, or whatever family tragedy you've had. Like you're so much more than that. But it's what because if it's unprocessed, it's like swirling around, and that's the first place that you go. It's the first thing that you think about. So it's how you identify. So you are shortchanging yourself. So I'm so glad that you were able to, just give credit to yourself and understand yourself better.
And I think also reminding ourselves that it's okay to be going in and out of these feelings, because they don't go away
No.
after a period of time.
Right.
I mean, we're 6 years into it. While we were in the creative process, it was like I was very consumed with the creative process. That was my focus. And in the mornings when I would wake up and remember that Liv was gone, and I would feel so sick I mean, literally physically ill. And then I would roll into, okay, we've got to get this work done. We have to be safe. We have to do no harm. And I kind of lost sight of myself for about 6 months. And it's so interesting because here we were producing a film about mental health and to take care of ourselves. And it took back to therapy. I found the most incredible grief counselor here outside of Philadelphia, and she really helped me to get through that process and to honor the feelings I was having, because I could feel really great one moment and then devastatingly grief stricken, or feeling guilty. What did I do wrong as a mom? And she helped me, and you've helped me a lot too. Tess has really helped me a lot. I think we've helped each other a lot, but to honor those feelings, and to realize it's part of the process, and it's going to be a continual process. I am 65 as well, and I am going to be learning for a number of more years. So.
Wait, I'm sorry. I want to just sit with that for a second. And I was thinking that because we've been talking as mainly our own family's stories, honoring those perspectives and also honoring the complexities of our own stories within that, I wanted to say, how do you find like a tie of yourself, or how do you, if you get lost in what you're creating, and creating meaning, like finding yourself with the spirit that we all love and have, lost. How do you find yourself, or what helps ground you in that moment or during that process? Is it something tangible? Can it be multiple things, or ways that you bring yourself now, tools that you think of bringing you into a healthy, balanced space? And maybe it's not that easy, but I just mean to say, like, what helps you to remember both yourself as an entity and your art as its own thing, and obviously the spirit of your loved one, or loved ones.
Yeah, I can answer that. I really liked what Honey said earlier about being good days and bad days still. And I think that's really resonates. Like last week was my sister's birthday, and I thought like, oh, I'm healed, I'm good, it's fine. And then you get upset and you're like, oh, I'm surprised almost by how deep these wells still are. And I think that really resonates with me. And on the creative level too, I think, you said earlier, Annalise, about your sister being more than her mental health. And she was so joyful and creative, and Maya had all these qualities that were beyond their, suffering, right? And I think that is the same with all of us in this room, that we can be more than one thing. We can be light and we can have the heaviness and we can have those both like live within ourselves. And I think, yeah, I think it's really beautiful.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm wondering, speaking of that, how we use labels around mental health or diagnostic labels. It can really make a big difference in how we tell our stories, right? Whether we choose to embrace them, whether we don't. So, for example, I've been reading a lot of recent studies that show that people, maybe especially who have borderline personality disorder, are much more likely, for example, to engage in suicidal behavior, self-harm, than almost any other identity category, right? So that there are certain ways in which this kind of diagnostic labeling can be helpful to understand human experience. But there are also limitations of that language, of the label or the normal or, just the category. And I'm wondering, do you think it's important, have you found that in your work, it's important to share a kind of diagnostic language or just labels around mental health? And does that help or harm how audiences engage with your work? So I'm really curious, do you, for example, resist the language of mental illness? Do you use different language? Do you really try to kind of point out wherever applicable the kinds of labels to describe, the people that we've lost? What do you all do in your work? I know that in my own work, I really have deliberately, decided to use the language like mental health struggles or mental health challenges rather than this term of illness or the term of normalcy, because I really want to question and decenter that whole, dichotomy. It's important to me, but I also understand that labels can be important. So I'm curious what the rest of you have found in your work.
So I think you're hitting on something so important here, and I talk about this a lot when I go out and talk about the book and some of the stuff that I've written journalistically. We just The problem is, well, there are a lot of problems, but chiefly it's that we just have such a poor understanding still of the human brain. And we attach these labels, a lot of which are very squishy. And I think one of the most instructive things for me was I was able to access my sister Nancy's some of her medical records from 1976. So we're talking ancient times. I had to go to court to be declared executor of her estate. It's a whole long story about how I was able to finally get these medical records. And there were not very many of them, but what they were very illuminating as to really the imprecision of how we describe people living with conditions or whatever you would say of with the way that they think. So in one page, they described my sister. They didn't use the term bipolar in those days. They called it mania and depression, and then schizophrenia with schizoaffective features. So I mean, it's such gobbledygook. There was just no way to decipher that. So, it's my belief through all these years of talking to people living with mental illness or various forms of unease and professionals, and then just the general public, is that we just don't have good ways to tease out the difference between somebody having situational, being mentally unwell, which I think we would say just about everybody I know is mentally unwell, especially these days. If you're not, you should be, people, heads up. But then that's very different than somebody with a diagnosis of schizophrenia or living with a chronic persistent mental illness. So there's such imprecision, first of all, in how we talk about this and how we write about it. And then then how we really understand it. I know there are good people working hard to understand these illnesses, but we still don't have, because there's no x-ray or blood test or kind of outside way of calibrating, and also these ways of thinking are fluid. It's not like people are in this constant state of mania or depression. So that's not really an answer to the question. It's just acknowledging that this is a pickle that we find ourselves in when we're tasked with describing it to people.
Yeah, I really love that. And I was going to add that, I think one thing have felt so resonate with me ever since, moving through our experience has been just the extraordinary complexity of the human psyche. And I think that is something that never ceases to just impress upon me, right? The gravity of that, to really wrap your mind around that, just how incredibly complex the human psyche is. I would love to hear if other of you have thoughts around these issues of labeling and the language that you choose to use.
I think me personally, I kind of live in that fluid place where, when I speak about myself, I'm very open of like, I have depression, I have anxiety, I struggle with OCD. But in my work with the Live Project, I think this is such a good question. I'm struggling answering it because I'm like, I haven't thought about it too much, I
Right.
guess, because I do it more off of like responsive impulse. Yeah, what do you think?
I mean, I agree with you. It's such a complex question. A lot of the time we kind of use the phrase emotional struggling, mental health struggles. And I know in the film we identify certain of Liv's comorbidities because there were multiples. And this makes me think of my husband who is bipolar, and he always says to Meg, to your point, none of us are quote unquote normal,
Right.
And he's just like, I'm a little more on the spectrum.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, that's how I think that's the way we've been identifying as more struggles, because and they are fluid, right?
Yes.
Not and like Tess, I mean, I struggle with anxiety, and certainly following Liv's death, I felt such an intense depression that I had never felt in my whole life. Like I could never relate to what Liv was going through when she was alive. I was always like, wow, I can't understand how you feel so intensely depressed. And when she died, boy, I learned what depression felt like, what true debilitating depression was. But like I said earlier, it's like we move in and out of these different emotions. Like we're not depressed all the time, or we're not manic all the time, or turning doorknobs 3 times in a row. I mean, but I don't think that's answering your question, but
It's a hard one.
it is. That's a good one.
Yeah, I can also jump in from the therapist point of view as well. I've seen behind the veil a bit too. I completely reiterate everything everyone said about this because it's so complicated. And I think diagnosis can help you find community. It can help you find, understand what's happening to you. And maybe that can make sense something for you. It can also be very othering. And like we said, it's a fluid situation. It's not like it's going to be necessarily a lifelong diagnosis. So I think it's really, really complicated. And I also think, these problems are so multifaceted. We're going to be naming problems, which we should. I think the mental health care system relies on insurance-based model. And that's the big problem too, is that we need diagnosis to justify our care. And it's all very complicated, but I don't think we've landed on a proper solution by any means as a society to these problems.
Gosh, just
Agreed.
jumping in on that too. Journalistically and diagnostically, everyone mentioned something that resonated with me about like accessing care, accessing resources, and even community sometimes. And as a student journalist, I wanted to interrogate the process of accessing medical records, because we did this in the case with Maya's story too. And also we tried to access facilities where Maya had been. And a lot of these, as family members, are even closed to you. And I was finding journalistically are closed. Other doors are closed for you because of the systems that quote, protect the patient care, like the HIPAA laws and everything, but then also can work against that when the families can't even know what happened or know what the patient or obviously our loved ones are dealing with and or were put through. And sometimes the records are inaccurate or the language changes. There are, in the state system at least, there are so many reports that are scribbled, they're written so much that when they're transcribed, and between Maya moving to different facilities, some were lost, some were overwritten. It's just it feels like an overworked, of course, body of people, both trying to support, but then also protecting health information in a system that serves who. And I came against all those questions. And I was thinking, especially as the legal or the age of people who are accessing information on diagnosing family members or themselves, either through social media or through conversations, is going down, where teenagers are especially one of the most rising populations in terms of mental health struggles and mental illness. We wanted to just open up to everyone to discuss what you, or how social taboos and stigma around public discussions of mental health have changed or evolved since you began your creative project, but also in your personal experience. So professionally and personally, certain stigmas you've come up against or confronted in sharing your work, and also in your lives.
Well, I'll say one quick thing. I mean, I was in the DEI space during the pandemic. And so, really at the same time as there was such a crisis in mental health during the pandemic, of course, so well documented and uplifted, the rise in adolescent depression, anxiety, suicide, at the same time that those things were happening, and we were all struggling with those mental health issues during the pandemic, there was also the DEI movement, which was really actually empowering people in multiple spaces to finally have conversations in public about mental health, about boundary setting, about things that really many people had not felt empowered to talk about until that moment. And so I think that was a really amazing space to be witnessing alongside the darker aspect of that time. And so for me, when I think about where we started our work, Annalise, I think, much of that space, I just think back to sort of relatives in Norway and kind of remembering that there was someone in my extended family who had schizophrenia, and how my parents had mentioned back in that day, right, that this was not discussed in society. No one knew that that person had schizophrenia. It wouldn't be brought up. They didn't really seem to be receiving any services, right? They were just kind of left in a certain room, right? And it was very much silenced. And I think that's really emblematic of our culture more broadly in the West, right? The sense that there was very much a space of taboo and silence around even talking about issues that departed from the quote normal. So, I think I look at two different trajectories. I look at like the trajectory from that time that I've heard about from my family, to today, where we are able to tell our story and have been able to, and partly we're supported by the movement in diversity, equity, and inclusion that really did start to carve out space for those kinds of difficult conversations. And I feel very grateful to that. So that's one perspective that I have on that question, but I'd love to.
Something that animated me in my reporting, and it's caused me to look at this question about stigma, and maybe a little in maybe a little different light than I used to, is recasting it as discrimination, which is, Thomas Insel. This is not an original idea. I have to say that I stole this from Thomas Insel, who, was the director of the National Institute on Mental Health, who's very searing, his poignant book about his time as the director, and his thoughts now on how he didn't discuss or consider what was going on in his own family. He had a son and a daughter who both struggled with some mental illness, and he talks about how when we discuss stigma, what we're really how that is framed is with a focus on the person living with the illness, we'll say, or with the issues of depression or mania, or not having control of thoughts. And what that does is really puts the pressure, or the it casts that as though that were I'm fumbling how he's saying it. He said it very well. The bottom line is, instead of looking at it like it's like the people living with the illness are marked, because the word stigma comes from stigmata, which is the markings of Christ on the hands and feet and head. And so what that does is it causes us then to look at the people living with these illnesses, these conditions, as just that, marked. In so many ways they are. That's how our society treats them. But what animated my reporting and what's been useful to me throughout is reframing that as discrimination. And then I was righteously outraged, at the way that people with serious mental illness are just are treated in society, that we don't make accommodations for them. To your point, Karen, about the DEI stuff. So we don't make accommodations for them. We don't, we don't provide safe housing. We deny them jobs. There's a separate hotline if you want to call to get your insurance to approve your coverage. You have to kind of bend over backwards, and so there's a double burden for somebody living with a mental illness versus an illness of another kind, which I stumble when I'm talking about it, because I think that illness is illness, whether you subcategory of mental or not. So anyway, I'm kind of rambling, but my point is that I think my hope is that people start to see this as discrimination and not, it can't stand, that we need to really protect people living with these illnesses and do a whole lot better for them than we're doing.
Well said.
Yeah, I really appreciate that reframe of stigma being discrimination. And I know my sister Liv felt that very much. I think she always felt othered. I think that's why she kept so much in, was because she wanted to seem normal.
Yeah.
There is no normal. Nothing is normal. We're all on a spectrum all the time in every capacity. Yeah, so I appreciate you sharing that as discrimination. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Or anything from your experience, Kylie, not to put you on the
Yeah.
spot.
No, I think it's been, again, very well said. Like, these panelists are amazing. I think, we've done so much in society about kind of like lowercase mental health stigma, right? Like, I think, like we said before, like more accepted forms of anxiety, depression, topics that we all struggle with in some way. It's a very human thing. And then these more like capital M mental health issues that might be like bipolar disorder, borderline, schizophrenia, schizoaffective. There's so much stigma around it still. And I don't think it's a purposeful stigma. I don't think it's something that society is trying to ostracize people, but there's a lack of education. And I think there's fear. I think people are afraid of talking about this stuff and about these disorders themselves. And I don't have a solution again. I keep wanting to have a solution, but I do think it's really valid, and it's something that everyone, has fought against. And I think I'm so inspired by all of you for just trying to decrease that little by little. I think stories are the best way that we can break down some of these things and bring them to light.
And as you said, you want to have a solution, but in some ways, a solution, it's complex more so than just like there's a problem or the illness. There's a solution for making people understand how this happens and how people feel going through this. And I think that brings me to also how each of us have experienced or not experienced senses of closure through our works, because this story, this work that we've shared has elements of having to draw lines and having to define things, but also we don't see it that way necessarily. We see it as being with the person, being with the presence, also investigating what happened and what could happen, and also what we feel and how we now connect with the person. But I wanted to just question our sense of what closure means and that definition, if being family members and related to these people and these also creative souls who we understand as having had mental health struggles. It would be interesting to hear what anyone thinks of that purpose of, or feeling, is closure something important that you've come across in any of your work, your processing? Is it something ongoing?
Well, I love that question actually, because I was thinking about success as another kind of idea that we have. Like, I think, for example, our culture, or certainly in the West, does really think about, put there out there models of grieving as kind of this linear thing that should happen in a certain way over time, right? Like the 7 steps, or, and so your perception is that you've got to arrive somewhere, right? Like, and if you don't, within a certain amount of time, you're just lost, like you're just off the radar somehow, you're hopeless maybe. And I've struggled with that. And we also tend to think about creativity and creative works often, right? And in relation to metrics of success, like how many books did you sell? Were you on the bestseller list? Like, did you win an award for that? And so the notion of success, I think, is one that we're really haunted by in society. And, you could say in that sense, all of our creative projects are doomed to fail, because for me, the only true success, maybe, deep in my heart, would be to bring Maya Logan back, right? Like, if that presence were really restored, then maybe my work would succeed. But we try to restore it in other ways. And I remember also, speaking to your question around closure, then, to get back to that concept and why I think that's a more important concept than this notion of success. But closure, even too, kind of fails me on a certain level, because one thing I realized, especially thinking about losing a child, was I just remember waking up one day and saying, oh, wow, yeah, this isn't getting easier, because actually Maya Logan's still not here again today. And now this is another day I'm waking up without them. And that's going to happen again tomorrow, by the way. And wow, so this isn't done and this isn't going anywhere. And so closure and success both feel like they leave me cold. I don't know that they relate at all to what my project has been or my trajectory. And I wonder, I would love to hear from the rest of you about I think closure and success both, like, they're just issues I struggle with on this topic, actually.
I don't think we're supposed to be over the grief, or I don't think we're supposed to have closure. I mean, we love them. I remember my dad saying, after my brother Danny died, so this was his second child to die, and he said, "Well, people stop telling me to stop crying." He said, "I want to cry. I miss them, and I never want to stop missing them." So I love that. I don't think we're supposed to. I mean, my sister died in 1978, and I miss her so much. Like, it felt great though to write this book, to kind of be with them again, and to remember, I think especially when you die by suicide, there is that, there is, of course, the shame that people impart on us, or that we feel inherently, whatever. And so that again denies you the opportunity to more fully grieve. But nonetheless, and I just think that it's, writing about them was a tender way to kind of be with them again, and that made me miss them all the more. So I think it's the opposite of closure, frankly.
Yeah.
And but it's okay. It felt good to be with them again, and I was grateful for that, because that kind of surprised me a little bit.
Oh, I love that, Meg. I never want to stop missing them. I couldn't agree more. I'm like, I never want to stop missing her. I never want to forget her. And closure to me, I think initially when my sister first died, I was in the mode of like, I have to figure out exactly what happened and how it happened and how I could have stopped it. And it really took so much in therapy, being like, you just have to accept you will never know exactly what happened, just like we never know what anyone is thinking at all times. So for me, like, every day it's a radical acceptance that my sister is gone,
Right.
and that she'll always be my sister, even though she's gone.
Right. Beautifully said.
Really well said. I in regard to closure, there is no closure.
Mm.
I mean, there never will be closure. There will always be questions. I mean, this is for myself. I mean, I don't, it could be different for you all, but for me, there will never be closure.
Mhm.
But, and Karina, when you were talking about success, for me, it's not the word success, but it's purpose. Like I have found purpose in our work. And shortly before Liv died, she had said to us, I'm so excited. I'm going to change my major from early childhood education. I'm going to become a therapist and I'm going to help other kids who have experienced the things I've experienced. And so for me, the work that we're doing at the Live Project is continuing that dream for Liv. And it gives me purpose when I hear from other young people that our work, our film, our game, that those things have changed their outlook, or they're going to, it has encouraged them to go get help, to seek community, to be open about their feelings. And so that's, I guess, what success and purpose is for me. But again, no closure, no closure.
You just said it all. I mean, I was thinking of, for myself, the closure was only in question while writing, while feeling like I was journalistically invested more than personally able to speak about what happened. It was this sense of, well, if I can't get an answer from this person, who can I go to next about where they were that night and what the facility they were living in was like, because their absence was so, at that point, arresting to me. So I agree, we never want closure in that sense, that would mean almost like another death. And there's a saying that I heard in an adaptation of 1001 Nights recently, which is, you die 3 times. One, when you actually physically die, a second time when your name stops being said, and a third time when the last person forgets or erases your name. And that was very interesting to me, because I do believe certainly and have faith in beyond this existence and this life, the purpose we're here being greater than to exist here. And so creating has been part of this purpose, and it definitely channels it into a physical form again, but maybe slowly realizing that you don't need answers, and sometimes you also have to come to things slowly in time, like just being on this campus. Also, I was talking to Kylie earlier about how I'm about to graduate, and Maya, and also I was talking to Mommy about this, Maya would be about to come to college and about to graduate right now, high school. And I always thought to myself, will I be able to imagine Maya Logan as an older version of, or a more evolved version of themselves, maybe devolved, I don't know. But just, could I be with that presence in time? Could we exist in the same space again? No, but in time, somehow I'm coming to this conclusion, but it's about there not being a conclusion, that there's always a changing relationship we have to these people and these hearts. And our love is what makes that last more than the time bounds and the space bounds and the life bounds. And also, Kylie, I was thinking of you when I mentioned closure, because you're reading, of course, Perfect Other. You hadn't found the body of your sister. And I'm just sharing this because I could picture, when I first learned of Maya Logan dying, I could not be there in the hospital where my mom and whole, basically family friends had gone. I could not confront that reality at that time. I was in my, I think, second semester here. And I just thought, I'm going to stay in New York. And I had a part-time job off campus, and I was so focused on being a person that Maya Logan and others could rely on somehow, that I wasn't present. And that was it was like my distraction from the reality of what was going on around me, and how I processed that. And it was very raw and very rough. And definitely, I think that has shaped how I now feel about this presence. But I spoke about closure just knowing that it would be a very controversial term and it could have
Mhm.
grown.
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think, all of these panelists and everyone here is searching for answers, right? That's a really common feeling of trying to get to the root cause of what caused this, that's gonna maybe bring you closure too. And then, as we just talked about today, these answers are really complicated and there's not clear answers or closure or a sense of completeness or, a villain you can go fight, right? There's not one solid thing that you can hold on to and grasp. So it's really hard. And I think creatively too, when you're writing a book or you're filming a documentary and you're making these projects, you have to give somebody an audience like an ending, right? So you have to manufacture, I think, a sense of closure sometimes too. And that speaks to the power of creative works it's happened to me twice now with my fiction book and with my nonfiction book. Is I think I've written endings before they've happened. And I'm like, oh, this is magic. Like actually, like I think
Mm.
you write yourself a happier ending, and then sometimes like you reach that later on. And I think, there's a lot of power in this. So this work and making a book like this is amazing. This is not going to be closure, but it is a amazing ending in some way to this story.
I want to just not push back, but I'm getting all chewed up in my own brain thinking about this. So I used as kind of a framework for my book the stanza from this Mary Oliver poem about it's called In Black Water Woods, and she writes in this beautiful stanza, to live in this world you must do three things: love what is mortal, hold it against your bones, knowing your whole life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. And I thought, wow, that's the story of my life. So the letting go part, that's not closure. So I'm trying to figure this out in my own brain, because as I said, as we're talking about this, I'm like, I don't have closure. That's fine. But what I do have is a sense of letting go, which I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. I think you can let go of guilt. You can let go. You can become, you can steep yourself in the, you've asked yourself, you've gone as far as you can go in asking questions that, maybe you didn't have the courage or the ability to do earlier. And there's some peace that comes with that. But peace and letting go are not the same as closure. Can I get an amen on that?
Yes,
Yes.
amen. Yes.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Well, we'd love to open it up if there are any final questions, that anyone has who's been listening or has joined us today. And thank you for joining. We'd love to hear. So I'll just kind of open it up.
Anyone in here, if you have any questions or panelists or just experiences, resonant things to share.
Annalise, I'd love to hear how you're feeling these days. How does it feel to actually have your book finished?
Gosh,
What
well,
are you doing? Graduating? So much happening.
thank you. It's also what's been now today here on my mind. I didn't allow myself to think of it too much before because it's almost like it's real. And this event very much made it real. As I said before, it felt like a full circle moment where this was the part of me that made me feel most outside of the community somehow, because it was that Barnard specifically was my dream school. As soon as I applied, I knew, oh, I want to be here. This is my community. But then coming here and facing that question so simply, and an icebreaker too, just it changed how I realized I would live that experience. And so having this book, I was reading it and holding it on the subway. In fact, I'm reading it myself at this time. And so holding it and seeing it, being able to share it, not even like literally, but just by having it out there, it feels like my sister is present and I can't control that presence. And the more and more it's out there, the less and less I can control it. And that is also speaking to the sense of letting go. It's like letting that life have its own. Always artists speak about the art having a life of its own outside of yourself, outside of the the body of the work too, because it touches other people and it reaches other people, or you at least hope, even if it reaches one other person in this process of making it. It's been a really incredible experience my mom has truly orchestrated, because publication isn't easy at all, but also, and getting your work out there, like, not to mention, isn't easy, but to be able to do it in a purposeful way and to figure out first through purpose, then where you go next is what I've been feeling through this process. And of course, now I just am honored to be able to share it through the Athena Center and Barnard, and having so much support and community, and also finding that I am learning from it, and it's a living source for me, has been so very prominent in my heart. So thank you for asking that question. And I was thinking, you're constantly writing. For me, writing is like it's a newer language for my sense of voice and art, but I've come to it through more journalistic lens in this work. And it was a bit harder for me to write from the personal perspective. And I got to accept to myself that's okay, that it's difficult for me to do that now, because also every work is in communication with maybe a next work, and it could be a different media format. So in putting together Chasing Spirits, it was really important to my mom and I to include almost social media posts, like a collage style, family photos, to include the radio journalistic transcript, also to include personal letters and notes, and of course, the showcase of Maya Logan's writing, because all of those conversations, they're not polished in one format where you can say, I define this as a novel. It's like a novel memoir, but it's so much more. And all of our works speak to that energy of being indefinable almost, but they do allow us to find that definite sense of being able to have that live outside of us and share it with others. It's beautiful. For everyone. I have some more questions, unless anyone in the audience does.
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for sharing your stories and your vulnerability, and opening your hearts and your families to us, and sharing in a very authentic way. Thank you for writing the book, and all, for the authors on here for writing your books, and Tess and Honey, thank you for creating the beautiful film. And I think, well, I know by talking about this, you're helping others, and you're helping others heal, either others that are here struggling, that were left behind from loved ones that died by suicide, or you're helping others that are struggling with the thought of suicide right now, and you're making it safe, and you're giving them a safe space to share. And I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenna. Jenna is our incredible executive director. She's amazing. So.
Thank you for joining us, Jenna.
She's an angel in our lives.
I want to say thank you for, as a sibling, having other siblings and spaces to talk amongst other siblings is such a balm. It's just really, it is. Yeah, it's hard for me to put into words, because it really does mean so much. It's like, our siblings will never come back, but we can connect with each other to feel them. And Annalise, I know this to be true because you always remember my tough dates. You always, you ask me about my sister, and I love talking with you and learning about Maya Logan, and just, we need each other, we need each other. So thank you.
It's such an emotional moment to me as well, because of that community truly that it feels like we share in this family and this love, and that means just everything. I think I saw.
Yeah, this is Chris. I just want to thank Karina for inviting me. I do not have a direct uh family member or relative who has taken this step for ultimate peace and rest. I have lost a sibling tragically, so I'm just thankful to hear some of these conversations and the very last comment about having opportunities to talk to siblings about the loss of a sibling. I lost my oldest brother when I was 5. Was accidentally killed by a drunk driver when he was riding his bicycle, and I saw that happen, and it has impacted me for all of my life, honestly. I'm 47 now, so 42 years of it. So having that, but the timing is amazing. Like, although I mentioned that I have not had a direct family member, I had a fraternity brother of mine who actually made this decision 2 weeks ago, and we're still grappling with everything. He was a leader in North Carolina, really, dedicated his life to just trying to uplift young people. And I know his life really, he had some struggles for sure, but we didn't see this one coming. And we're all trying to, as in my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, we're really close to one another. So we're trying to process what has happened here. So this conversation was certainly very relevant and timely. So I just want to thank you all. So thank you. I will have my camera on, but I'm laying on my bed. I'm tired today. So
Good for you.
I'm so sorry for your loss, Christopher, for both your losses.
and thank you.
But also what incredible timing, as you said, just we wouldn't have been able to know even that you that we would be able to share in this space, and that just it's telling. We have to be able to support each other through this, and also know that their presence is with us, guiding us here. So with that, if there anyone else who wants to ask a question, I think we're almost at time.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for all of your beautiful sharing and just for being here. And it really means the world to us that you came, that you made time for us, and also that you really were brave enough to listen and to share your stories as well. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for organizing it, and thank you for abiding my boneheaded late arrival. So it was just an honor to be with you all, and I wish you all the best.
Likewise, same. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, and congratulations. What a beautiful offering to this world.
Yay.
I love this. Thank you so much. We're so honored to have been here, and yeah,
Everyone keep doing the good work.
yeah,
You're all
keep
so great.
talking to keep bringing your stories forward. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you to everyone who joined us in person as well. Thank you. All right. With love.
Love.